tonight.
President, are we going to war with Iran? Hope not.
The global what if. The world holds its breath as the U.S. prepares for a worst-case scenario in Iran.
All human life is precious.
Pro-life legislation is sweeping the nation. What it could mean for Roe v. Wade.
Our proposal fulfills our sacred duty.
And what the White House unveiling of a new immigration plan means for Congress.
This as the Equality Act passes the House. How it could impinge on religious freedom.
We need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
Plus, pulling aside the curtain on disinformation and artificial intelligence.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Is Iran and the United States gearing up on a war footing? Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, members of Congress are chomping at the bit for information on the escalating tensions with Iran. And while both countries say they don't want war, their actions don't seem to reflect that.
CBN National Security Correspondent Eric Phillips joins us with the latest. Eric?
Jenna and John, we're learning more about the intelligence on both sides of this potential conflict. It seems both sides are gearing up after each of them received information that the other was planning to strike. It is the question on everyone's mind.
President, are we going to war with Iran? Hope not.
The answer perhaps providing a little relief.
One of the places that I agree with the president is in both of us in our opposition to the war in Iraq.
But the signs point in another direction. The U.S. moving warships and bombers to the region last week, citing unspecified threats, and days later ordering all non-essential American personnel out of Iraq. In between, 4 Saudi oil tankers destined for the U.S. bombed, Iranian influence suspected in those attacks. Leaders on Capitol Hill complain they are being largely kept in the dark about what's prompting all of this.
And I would tell the administration you should pick up the phone and call members of Congress so that we don't have a microphone put in our face, ask us about why you're doing something and we have no clue.
Thursday, administration officials did brief leaders of the intelligence committees. Sources say that's when they learned the threat stemmed from intelligence showing Iranian militias loading missiles onto small ships in the Persian Gulf that could attack U.S. vessels. But the Wall Street Journal reports separate intelligence led Iranians to believe the U.S. was going to attack them, sparking their militias to action.
I think any action this administration takes will be thoughtful, will look through, and will be in consultation with the House and the Senate.
Problem is, the full Congress won't be briefed for several more days.
Unfortunately, the only briefing that they're promising is next week. I'm hoping it's not too late, literally.
Of course, tensions began to skyrocket after Iran partially pulled out of that nuclear agreement a little more than a week ago, citing unfair U.S.-led sanctions against them. The regime wants a revamped deal, and they want it by the beginning of July, or they're threatening to increase their supply of uranium, which is used to make nuclear weapons.
Thanks, Eric. Well, Eric, as far as developing that new agreement, will Iran actually sit at the table with the United States?
Well, it's certainly a meeting that U.S. officials would welcome, but Iran's leadership is unwilling at this point. You see, the Trump administration pulled out of the nuclear agreement about a year ago, and at this point, it seems Iranian officials only want to negotiate with those who are officially a part of the pact.
All right, Eric Phillips, thank you very much.
Well, joining us now is Kirk Mills, a foreign affairs reporter for the National Interest. Kurt, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, based on your reporting, can you give us a sense how tense is the situation over there in the Middle East right now?
It's getting hot. I think we have seen in the last 2 weeks a real shift in the dynamic from, of course, everyone knows the administration has a tough line on Iran, but in the last 2 weeks, we have seen arguably more movement than we have in the past 2 years. And two parties, Iran and the United States, are on the edge of an actual military exchange.
So what do you think? Will we or won't we go to war?
I think it is less likely than not, but distressingly possible.
Kurt, I want to follow up with that. On the intelligence issue, it's apparent that the United States has been getting intel from the Israelis. The Iranians are saying that they had intel that the United States was going to strike, and they were just responding to that. Is that credible?
Israeli intelligence is definitely credible. All sides are involved on this, but the fact is, it's a question of choice. At the end of the day, does the United States view the Iranians as the preeminent challenge, and do they want to use the full force of the U.S. military to force a change in Iranian behavior?
Yeah. Last week, Iran pulled out of parts of the Iran nuclear deal. And of course, the regime has been active in its proxies in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Why is Iran, Kurt, seemingly becoming more and more belligerent?
Well, I think it's important to note that the original JCPOA, the Iran deal, did not link its regional behavior. It was strictly about the nuclear issue. And Iran, critics would say, once they signed the deal, felt that they had carte blanche for an expansionist attitude in the region.
Kurt, there's also reporting that John Bolton, the national security advisor for Trump, is pushing for war, and he may be on the outs with President Trump.
Yes.
That's your reporting.
Yes.
And he may be, sorry I didn't attribute that,
No.
that he may be on the outs with President Trump. Can you give us a little bit more background on that?
I think it's important to remember that just because an official within Trump world is more exposed doesn't mean that they're less influential. This is an incredibly influential national security advisor. I think that the president and his NSA, Mr. Bolton, Ambassador Bolton, don't always agree. That's been clear from the beginning. Trump knew that when he hired him. I think the main issue is whether or not Bolton is being perceived as driving the bus. That is unacceptable. A President Bolton is not something President Trump wants to hear about.
It's interesting to see because it seems, based on all the reporting and all the projection of President Trump, that he's always, as you were just saying, in the driver's seat and kind of the one who's been pushing or edging towards more of a provocative war footing. But now we're seeing just the reverse. He's actually arguing more of a diplomatic approach.
I think it's like anything else. I think North Korea is a good model. I think he likes fire and fury in his rhetoric, and that's the way it's important for him to be very tough. That's the emphasis. But the president fundamentally is not an interventionist, and I think it would be surprising if he allowed those under him to push him in that direction.
All right. Yeah. Well, Kirk Mills with Foreign Affairs, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kurt. Well, Missouri Governor Mike Parson is expected to sign a bill. He's expected to sign a bill approved by the state's Republican-led legislature that will impose major restrictions on abortion. The law banning all abortions at 8 weeks into a pregnancy will make Missouri the latest of at least 11 states to pass major pro-life legislation restricting or banning abortions this year.
Well, the official White House unveiling of a new immigration plan is already in trouble. The plan to focus on high-skilled workers and, quote, transform U.S. immigration into a merit-based system focusing on high-skilled workers was met with a tepid response from Democrats in Congress.
I want to just say something about the word that they use, merit. It is really a condescending word. Are they saying family is without merit? Are they saying most of the people who have ever come to the United States in the history of our country are without merit because they don't have an engineering degree? Certainly, we want to attract the best in our to our country, and that includes many people from many parts of society.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the president's plan does not address the 11 million undocumented immigrants already here in the United States. Eric Metaxas joins us now. He is the host of the Eric Metaxas radio show, which is now going to air on TBN. Eric, congratulations.
Thank you, but how can a radio show air on a TV station? Yeah. I don't get it.
How did you get to make that happen?
It's kind of complicated. Matt Crouch had the crazy idea. I thought it was crazy, and then I realized, no, I'm crazy because he's kind of a genius, media genius. They created a studio for me in New York. When you see it, everybody gasps. They created the most gorgeous TV studio.
So a hard turn onto the president's immigration plan. Senator Richard Blumenthal made the point that if the plan was in place when his grandfather was alive, his grandfather wouldn't have been allowed to come to the United States. What do you make of the president's plan?
First of all, I got to say, I think Blumenthal is crazy to say such a thing. And it's, you know what it is? It's sad to me that we've gotten to a point where the Democrats are playing hardball politics. They're going to say almost anything. For Blumenthal to say that it's utterly meaningless. The fact is that we have a president who finally has the guts and the courage to see the situation as it is. If we do not take a hard line on illegal immigration, on building a wall and having an actual border. This didn't matter 40 years ago. It matters today. And so I am 1,000% behind his plan. And, you know, probably the Democrats are going to continue to say things like this. We have a president who's a real leader, and he can ignore those kinds of nattering nabobs of negativism, to quote Spiro Agnew and William Safire, and he's going to do the job the American people elected him to do.
Eric, on the issue of abortion, even among evangelicals, there's not consensus on when there should be exceptions or even when life begins. What do you think? What's your take?
Well, I think, first of all, the great thing about the Alabama law is it has forced a conversation in the country that we should have had in 1973. The Supreme Court, and they did the same thing with same-sex marriage, they very ham-handedly and prematurely made a law that ought to have been discussed so that the states could decide it. That's what the founders said ought to happen. The people ought to, government ought to be as local as possible, and that you only resort to the federal level. You only resort to the judiciary and the Constitution in the most extreme circumstances. This is something that we ought to discuss. Every state ought to be able to make its own laws. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe life begins at conception. I do. But the point is that we have a government that says we are supposed to talk about things on the state level. And so when you have people, I guess, really not allowing that conversation to happen, you have to do radical things. What they did in Alabama is radical. I agree with Pat Robertson that perhaps, you know, saying 99 years to life for doctors performing abortions might be somewhat draconian. But the point is, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We need to have the conversation, and that doesn't happen overnight. What happened in 1973 happened overnight. Roe v. Wade is bad law. It's an abomination. We need to have the conversation, and the people of America need to think about what happens during an abortion. We need to discuss it. It is gruesome. We need to face the gruesomeness of it. Once we face the reality of abortion, which we have not done because of Roe v. Wade, once we face that, then we can have the ability to make laws that reflect the people's will. We haven't done that.
Eric, we're tight on time, but I want to sneak this question in. The other day I was on a flight talking to a woman about faith, and she couldn't seem to bifurcate faith over being identified by her politics. More and more it seems Christians are identified by how they vote and who they vote for. Where do evangelicals draw the line before the credibility of our witness is undermined by politics?
I don't think we can worry about that too much. In other words, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is I think we sometimes worry about that too much. People in the day of Wilberforce, I wrote a biography of William Wilberforce, the great man who abolished the slave trade in the British Empire, led that battle politically. People told him to keep his faith out of politics. How do you keep your faith out of politics when people tell you the slave trade is okay? It's the law of the land. Shut up. At that point, you have to say, my faith in the God of the Bible demands that I get political, because God demands that I care about those Africans who are being enslaved. Similarly today, if I care about my fellow Americans, or for that case, in that case, everybody around the world, I have to sometimes express my faith politically. And I really think evangelicals often worry too much about their quote-unquote witness. And the fact of the matter is, if we don't stand up for the least of these, I kind of wonder, what gospel is it that you're preaching? So I really think we're at a time when, you know, it's a much longer conversation. But many evangelicals are all fussy about, oh, I don't want to be identified with this or that. And I think, you know what? You should worry about that less and worry about the unborn and justice more. And, you know, I'll leave it there.
I gather it's lively conversations like this is why you have a TV show coming on.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you. Well, today, Democrats in the House passed the Equality Act. When we come back, why some say it's anything but.
Well, today, the House of Representatives passed a landmark bill that critics warn could hurt the right of religious freedom. Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler says the Equality Act is anything but equal.
It tramples on the rights of women and others by forcing a top-down government discrimination against those who hold differing views on marriage and on human sexuality.
The bill, which broadens protections for LGBTQ Americans, could have disastrous unintended consequences, including weakening parental involvement in children's medical decisions.
Well, CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now with more. Abigail, this act could have many repercussions.
That's right, Jenna. And Republicans are saying, if the bill really was just protecting LGBTQ people from discrimination, then they would maybe even support that. But there's so much more when they dug into this bill. It funds abortion. They're really worried about the gender identity issue and allowing people who identify as female or vice versa participate on, biological males are joining female sports teams. And it's already happening in many states around the country like Connecticut. And there's just a lot of other things in this bill that they're very concerned about and sounding the alarm on. I spoke with Congressman Biggs from Arizona, and he said that echoed what Hartzler said. We talked about many things, the Equality Act. We also talked about the president's immigration plan, and we'll show you a little bit about that interview now.
Well, this bill is really, really broadly construed. It's broadly written, and it's meant to be that way. So it's going to change. If were this to become law, it would actually change the way religious institutions do business, educational institutions do business. Actually, virtually any business or any entity in the public sector is going to be changed dramatically. It changes everything from abortion by recognizing it as a civil right to mandating federal spending for abortions. I mean, it is very, very broad, and who knows if it'll get out of the Senate, I don't know. But it's not quite what some people think it is. Some people think, oh, equality. Well, we all want everyone to be able to be treated equal. But it really actually changes the very nature of a way most businesses and institutions will conduct themselves were this to become law. Well, I think the president's on the right track in the requirement that we have people who coming in that we need them to be here. That's going to be beneficial to the country, and it's changing and flipping the familial basis. I think there's some other things that could be done. I mean, like child citizenship, birthright citizenship. This has become an issue. But the main thing for me was that he kept focusing on the border security, because right now you have 4,000 people coming over into this country illegally every day that we apprehend. We anticipate maybe 2 or 3 times that many people are getting in without apprehension. We were so overrun that we've let, just in the first few months of this year, almost 200,000 people just free into the country who are otherwise illegally in the country. So I think he's on the right track. There's a lot to do, but I really think what made me happiest is that he's still focusing on the border issue, which coming from Arizona, that's a real issue. In the House, it has a tough climb, let's be honest with you. Democrats are already saying it's DOA, which means that it probably won't even get a fair hearing. There are ways to leverage certain aspects so we can at least get a hearing and see if we can make it go forward, but if it were to pass, I would be stunned, to be honest with you. It had worsened from when I took people just a couple months before. I took a bunch before, about 2 months before. It had already worsened. We've witnessed, for one example, a detention facility designed for 250 people with over 750 people in it. The conditions were terrible, so the humanitarian issue is bad. We saw multiple groups with 2 groups with 42 in them each, and a whole bunch of other groups coming across, and everybody was paired up with a child, oddly enough. Why? Because of our laws that say if you've got a child, you're going to be treated differently, you're going to be released. It was exceptionally bad, if I can put it that way. And I will tell you that some of my colleagues who came down were, they didn't know whether it was bad or not, but when they saw it, they came back and said, this is horrible, we've got to do something, and they're all on board with us today. So right now, most people don't realize this, but the Internal Revenue Service treats abortion as a medical out-of-pocket expense for deduction purposes. And my bill would simply say, no, we're not going to allow you to count abortion as a medical care or health care. I mean, most of us think of health care as, gee, I'm not feeling well, so I need to see a doctor or someone for some health care. Or else we're going to try to prevent ourselves from being sick. That might be used, but not abortion. And so that's what this is about.
As you can see, we hit on a whole range of things in the Congressman Biggs interview, but I want to make one more point on the Equality Act. It will now move to the Senate, where Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not expected to bring it to the Senate floor. But that being said, I do not imagine it will be something that will go away.
Yeah, this issue's not going away. My goodness. All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you.
When we come back, artificial intelligence is making it possible to create events that never happened appear as though they did. How the U.S. is trying to spot what's called deepfakes. Welcome back. A little-known military unit called the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, is responsible for some of the most important technological innovations on Earth.
Now, DARPA is spearheading the detection of a growing threat, disinformation and fake videos known as deepfakes.
When you look at an image or video online, can you tell if it's been manipulated or not?
That's the central question behind DARPA's latest endeavor. Faking pictures is not new. A portrait painter in 1865 stuck Abraham Lincoln's head on this Southern Civil War politician's body. This 1902 image of Ulysses S. Grant is actually a composite of 3 other photographs. Stalin's army of photo retouchers removed this official after his execution in the 1930s. But in the span of just a few years, technology has harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to create and manipulate new worlds and new faces. From the cityscape of the first AI-made streets to the creation of photorealistic faces that may or may not even exist.
I made my co-author to dance Gangnam Style, which I don't think he would do by himself.
Using videos of dancers like this, scientists play puppet master to make other researchers put on the moves.
That was created by machines, it's not me.
It's a level of deep fakes created by deep learning and artificial intelligence that's getting harder and harder to detect. The ability to synthesize dance patterns is one thing, but the folks at DARPA are working to detect these sorts of manipulations to prevent much more sinister scenarios.
You can construct multiple instances of media that all support an event that never happened.
Matt Turek is the program manager behind the Media Forensics program.
While it's still beyond the state of the art to generate that completely fictitious event with multiple supporting media, you know, the potential for that is probably a year or a couple of years out.
The worry is that state actors could use deepfakes to manufacture completely fictitious events.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
The man behind the curtain in this 2018 deepfake featuring President Obama is actor Jordan Peele, but the warning is real.
Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
DARPA's detection team is racing to keep pace.
We have a bit of a cat and mouse game going on here.
As the technology behind AI-engineered video manipulation accelerates at breakneck speeds.
The ability to detect whether an image or video has been manipulated may provide you some clue that maybe there's a disinformation campaign that's going on.
Gabe LaMonica, CBN News, Washington.
And that does it for Faith Nation.
Night.